Well, hi, folks. We're going to let everyone flow in here along the way. Glad everybody is here joining us today. I'm going to throw a poll up on the screen while we're getting started here. We'll just hang out briefly while folks make their way into the Zoom room. It's always the fun part about starting one of the webinars, is sort of seeing the numbers gradually grow as everybody sort of comes in through the Zoom gate. We were talking earlier about whether or not there was a better descriptor for that. Yeah, so just trying to get a little bit of a sense of who's joining us today.
Looks like I love the nothing help. I'm so glad that you're here. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it looks like we've got a pretty good combination. Pretty good combination of folks joining us today. Well, welcome. We're very glad you're here. My name is Meredith Graham. I am a counselor here with Collegewise. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. And for those of you who don't know Collegewise, we are the nation's largest private college counseling company. We've got around 70 different college counselors around the US. And our goal is really to help increase the joy and decrease the stress of the journey to college. We feel like it's just really gotten too stressful and too complicated. So families help us to hire us to help them with all different parts of the process, from identifying great activities and building great college lists and writing fantastic essays and test prep and all sorts of stuff so that families can reclaim the dinner table and a little bit of sanity. Just a little bit about me before we get rolling. I've been a counselor with Collegewise since July of 2013, so almost 9 years now. And as I said, I'm currently based in Columbus, Ohio, and I work mostly online. Before joining Collegewise, I spent almost 15 years on the college side in admissions and advising and recruiting. But before that, I spent 4 fantastic years at a liberal arts college, College of Worcester, go Scots, where I learned exciting things like chemistry and how to play the bagpipes. True story. That leads us to today's topic, which is the value of a liberal arts education. And so I'm going to have my fellow panelists here introduce themselves. I'm going to have Caitlin and Matt introduce themselves, and then we'll do a little bit of housekeeping kinds of stuff. And then we will we'll move into our fun discussion for the evening. Caitlin, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Caitlin Harper. I use she, her pronouns, and I, like Meredith and Matt, am a Collegewise counselor. I am based in Salem, Oregon, which is an hour south of Portland. I am also coming from a liberal arts background. My story is that I grew up in Kansas, and you can make every Wizard of Oz joke that you want, but I was desperate to get out of Kansas, and I did that for college. I came out to Portland and found Lewis and Clark College, a wonderful liberal arts and science institution, and loved it so much that I decided I couldn't leave, and I worked in the admissions office there for a decade. So from a student perspective to an enrollment perspective, I definitely cut my teeth on liberal arts, the value, and I am excited to be able to share that with you. I loved Meredith's little tidbit about what you learned in your own liberal arts education. And I'd say the spectrum for me was probably like early childhood development to all of Jane Austen's entire catalog of work. That's a pretty wide spectrum for me.
Pretty good.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Doyle, and I am a remote-based counselor for Collegewise. I have spent the last decade working in college admissions, both on the college side of the desk as well as the high school side of the desk. So I started working in admissions at my alma mater, Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, and then I worked in the admissions office at Hamilton College in upstate New York, a small liberal arts school. And for the last 6 years, I've been working with students on the high school side of the desk, previously at Kent Denver School in right outside of Denver, Colorado. And I didn't go to a liberal arts school. And I think after having worked at Hamilton, that was one of my bigger regrets, because I looked around and saw all of the amazing things that the students that I was helping guide through the process and kind of sell the school to, all of the things that they were able to take advantage of. And I just didn't know that those things existed prior to working in admissions. So a little bit of a regret there.
Well, I'm glad you shared that. I think that, to me, that's going to be one of the great things about this kind of a webinar tonight is, families will be able to sort of learn some of the things that maybe you wish you'd known back then. And Caitlin, that you and I both happen to have learned a little bit earlier in our own academic journeys. So just a quick couple of housekeeping notes here. Tonight's session is being recorded. So you will get the link to this recording in your email in the next day or so after this. If you have questions along the way, please put them in the Q&A section instead of the chat. It's easier for us as panelists to see them there and to make sure that we're answering them there. And speaking of Q&A, we will have Q&A near the end of the session. So please do add your questions in there as they come up. So let's get into all of the good stuff here. You probably gathered a little bit about what a liberal arts education is about as we were sort of talking here. Sort of the idea behind a liberal arts education is that it provides students with a really broad-based education that combines a lot of different subjects in the arts and the natural sciences, social sciences, and humanities. And the idea behind it is to really learn how to think and communicate and sort of have a broad-based education for critical thinking and lifelong learning. I think it's kind of a dry explanation, but that's kind of what it is. But Caitlin, you've got a really great analogy. Why don't you go ahead and share that one?
Yes, I do. I learn in analogies. I'm a visual person and I like being able to draw those connections in life. Why I'm a liberal arts student, or maybe chicken and egg, I don't know. But the analogy I have for a liberal arts education is, imagine you're building an ice cream sundae. The idea of building that in a liberal way means you're going to fill it with every different kind of ice cream, cover it with all of the different kinds of toppings. You're going to liberally fill that sundae dish with a lot of variety, right? So lots of different combinations. And as you build liberally, once you're got the finished product, you are also enjoying liberally as well. And by doing that tasting of all of the different things that you've built in your sundae, you're finding connections and combinations that you like and those that you might not, right? So should I put chocolate covered gummy bears on my ice cream sundae? I haven't tried it before, but I might like it. So I'm going to put it there. What would maraschino cherries and pistachio ice cream taste like? I'm going to make my next spoonful that combination. And so when I think about a liberal arts education, that is a very similar situation. It is an education that is supposed to be expansive and one that allows you to get curious and find connections and likes and dislikes. And it's one that is hopefully going to be very enjoyable and delicious in an intellectual way too.
I love that description. I partly because I think back to my own experience and I think about all of the different things that I got a chance to try. My two favorite classes when I was an undergrad were masterpieces of musical theater and linguistic anthropology, neither of which had anything whatsoever to do with my major, but they were my favorite classes and they just seemed interesting. And so I took them. And that's the beauty of a liberal arts education to me. And so Matt, I'm going to ask you sort of from the opposite side, then we sort of have a sense of like, oh, maybe what might sound appealing to somebody. What do you think makes a student a good student for a liberal arts college in your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if we're going off of Caitlin's analogy of the ice cream sundae, right? You want somebody that's hungry. You want somebody who is who is going to take advantage of those different opportunities. So that curiosity piece is something that when I was reading files for the admissions office, that was something that we were often trying to discern in those applications. Is this student curious? Is this student somebody who's going to come and take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to them at this institution, whether that be in the classroom, but also extracurricularly? A liberal arts education doesn't stop once the lecture is over. They really hope that students take what they're learning in those classes and extend it to the greater community as well. So I think there's the intellectual curiosity, both academically and then also extracurricularly. And then they also want students who are going to be involved members of the community, because one thing that I think every liberal arts college will kind of hang their hat on is the strength of the community that exists on that campus. And they want students who are going to come in and strengthen that.
Yeah. And that, I think that makes perfect sense. When you're talking a little bit about community there, what do you think makes a liberal arts community, and this, both of you, what do you think makes a liberal arts community a strong community, or a particular kind of community?
Caitlin, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I've got one off the top of my head, and then
Yeah.
maybe we can ping pong. To me, one of the biggest differences shifting from my high school education to being in a liberal arts setting was a shift from homogeneous learning, where I was with the same group of students in one class, US history, and then we all went to the next class, English, we all went to the next class, to one that was, again, all mixed up. I was consistently meeting new people with different interests and backgrounds, but we were in classes where those differences were really pulled out from us, and we were able to find similarities and connections despite being different majors, or being from different home states, or loving musical theater or loving football. That to me was one of the most profound aspects of the community in my own experience at a liberal arts college. And when I talk to students now about a liberal arts environment, it's one that I really push back on when students might be a little hesitant to go to a smaller school, because that small size means something very different in a college context. And not always, but generally speaking, liberal arts and science colleges do fall in the small to medium range as far as student bodies go. And so that tight-knit community, sure, comes from small sizes, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same as a small high school environment would.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to supervise the tour guide program when I worked in the admissions office, and interviewing tour guides was always one of my favorite times of the year, because I would hear their resumes and just all the different things that they were involved with. And, a student would reach a lull in that conversation and you would expect them to finish, but they were really just trying to remember what else they were doing on campus. And it wasn't just, oh, I'm on the soccer team, so I do all athletics things. It was, I'm on the soccer team, I'm a peer tutor, I am doing this with the student activities board, and like the list just kept going on and on and on. So I think that there's the opportunity for you to not get siloed at liberal arts schools, where, speaking from my own undergraduate experience, you get involved in one or two things and you're like, all right, I have my activities, this is what I'm going to do. On a liberal arts campus, I just felt like there was more opportunity to keep adding to that list if you wanted it.
I know one of the analogies sometimes, the ice cream metaphor, it continues, like we can keep talking about adding to the sundae here. There's also, sort of this conversation around, you get to wear a lot of different hats at a liberal arts college. And we talk about that from the staff side, but that's also true from the student side. And that's something I try to emphasize to my students now as well, when, they're thinking about what kind of colleges do I want to apply to? There are definitely a lot of misconceptions. You're sort of hearing them bubble up in here already. But one of the, I think, most frequent ones that I hear is that, oh, everybody who goes to a liberal arts college is a hippie granola freak. And, if I have any sort of middle of the road opinions or views or more conservative views, or if I'm not, completely granola crunchy, that it's not going to be a good fit for me. Caitlin, how do you talk about that specifically with families and with students who are sort of questioning whether or not this is a good fit for them?
Yeah, this question, of course, is going to come to the girl that went to and worked at the small, crunchy granola liberal arts college in Portland, Oregon. But that is exactly sort of the foundation of what I talk about. The first really important context, especially when you think about what a college counselor is going to be able to give you as far as perspective, is small liberal arts and science colleges exist across the country. So you can't make assumptions for the entire population of our cohort of colleges or universities, because they exist everywhere. And we know location has a lot to do with what you're going to find in regards to community, right? But I will say that the benefit I see, it's another really big benefit of going to a liberal arts and science university and how they approach education. Meredith mentioned it at the beginning. There's a very strong focus on critical thought and being able to problem solve from a number of different angles. So regardless of whether you feel like you are surrounded by a certain type of student and you might be in the minority, your education is going to be one that forces you to think about problems and be able to communicate about your own beliefs in a way that is understanding of all sides. I grew up in Kansas. I thought I was very liberal. I thought I wore the crunchy granola hat well. Speaking of hats, gosh, we really love analogies today. But I went to Lewis and Clark and very quickly realized that, political beliefs and ideations are a spectrum. And I had to come to terms with that, right, for myself and as it related to my peers that I got to know in the classroom setting and outside of it. So first thing I'd say in answering that question is we've already talked about what liberal education actually means, and it has nothing to do with political values. So just break that connection in your head altogether. But if you have heard that liberal arts and science colleges tend to foster the same mindset of people, instead think about the kind of education that you will be receiving and the fact that you will be encouraged, sometimes required, to think beyond that mindset. That was incredibly valuable to me.
Yeah. And you mentioned sort of that critical thinking really, being key here. Matt, I'm going to ask you to tackle one of the other, I think, biggest misconceptions that I hear all the time is if you go to a liberal arts college, you're not going to be able to get a job or you're not going to have marketable skills. And that comes up all the time with my students. I'm always teaching them to sort of look at the first destination survey and get connected on a liberal arts college's website with their career services and their career counseling and sort of seeing what kinds of internships do they have and what kinds of connections in the community. But how do you address that, both when you were on the admission side, but then also on the counseling side? How do you tackle that misconception with your students?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people think that life is pretty linear, right? I go to college, I major in this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I did not major in college counseling. I did not know that this job existed until I started working in admissions. So I think that when you go to a liberal arts college and you get that degree, no matter what your degree is, you're gaining transferable skills for any field, right? You're learning how to think creatively. You're learning how to analyze situations, considering a variety of different viewpoints. And then you're also learning how to articulate those conclusions that you're coming to, both through speaking, and then also at most liberal arts colleges, you're still going to have to take some classes that involve writing, even if you are a math major. And those types of skills are going to serve you no matter what field you go into. So the misnomer exists, I would say, of like, oh, if I go to a liberal arts college and I major in English, I will not be able to get employed elsewhere. You will, because you have these skills that you're able to market. And I think that if you look at those career outcomes pages on these college websites, you'd be really surprised at the high percentages. It's very rare for a liberal arts college to have a success rate or a placement rate lower than 90% of their college graduates within the first 6 months of graduating, of being employed or in grad school, or taking on a year of service, or one of those outcomes.
Yeah, definitely.
And I throw in one of my favorite examples of this. A student who chose a liberal arts and science institution because they were undecided, which I think is a pretty common reason to choose the liberal arts, and a good one, liberal arts education, found their way to math, realized they love math and the department was a good fit for them and they had a good connection with faculty. So they majored in math and they graduated and they got a job in accounting at an optometrist's office. So they worked there right out of graduation for a couple of years, but realized they didn't want to be an accountant. They wanted to be the optometrist. So they went to med school and are now doing residency in optometry, right? Like, that is an arc of a liberal arts education and the preparation that can happen. She was employable right out of graduation. She also was adaptable when her interests and her goals for her life changed.
And I think that, to me, that's part of the key, is the adaptability, sort of that lateral thinking and the transferable skills. I mean, I've sort of made reference a couple of times to my learning chemistry. I actually was a chemistry major in college, but I was completely undecided when I went to college. I had no idea what I wanted to major in. And of course, that's something that's really embraced at liberal arts colleges. You don't have to be decided at a liberal arts college. And I just happened to take some classes I was interested in and found out I liked the chemistry stuff. And my first job out of college was in research and development at Procter and Gamble, because I was well prepared. I was well trained. I knew a lot of science. And then I got there and did that for a couple of years and realized that wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And I switched back to education because that was much more where I was interested. But I actually use that chemistry degree every day in various different kinds of ways, partly because of the chemistry itself and the analytical skills and the critical thinking skills and the writing skills that came along with all of the different classes, but also because of the hands-on experience. There are a lot of liberal arts colleges that have some sort of like a senior capstone kind of a thing. I know Worcester has one, Allegheny has one, Reed has one. And I think that sort of addresses one of the other misconceptions that I'm going to toss out there, which is the idea that liberal arts colleges, you can't major in something STEM at a liberal arts college, right? That's, it's sort of this idea that liberal arts is only artsy stuff and that the sciences don't exist there. And, Caitlin, you gave a pretty good example. Matt, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that it's another pretty big misnomer that exists out there. If you are going to a liberal arts college, you're going to be in smaller STEM classes to begin with. And the professors there, their focus is actually on teaching and not on getting published and those types of things. Those things happen still because they're professors, they're in academia and they want to still do that. They have that curiosity, but you have access to them. So getting involved with research opportunities and those types of things is a little bit easier because your professor actually knows you on a personal level. And if they have a project that aligns with your interests, that barrier to get hooked up with that project is much smaller. You're able to go to their office hour because you're already going to their office hour on a regular basis. So STEM programs at liberal arts colleges are actually incredibly strong. It's just that it's a different way of framing it, as opposed to a good STEM program equals this many professors being published and having their research done and those types of things.
And it's, of course, not that the professors aren't doing the research
Right.
too, which I know you said, but that's definitely, it's all the undergraduates who are working on those research experiences then with them, getting all of that attention. Yeah. Yeah. One other thing that comes up a lot of times for students, it's the med school question, which isn't the same as the STEM question, but it's closely related to it, I think. I'm working with a student right now who knows he wants to go to med school, or is pretty confident he does. One of his parents is a doctor, but both of his parents are from Europe originally, and they have sort of this direct to med school model, as opposed to sort of the American model where you go to college and then you apply to med school. And so they've been having trouble sort of wrapping their brains around some of the different approaches to this. And he is going to be so fantastic at a liberal arts college. I keep telling him, like, look at this, look into these places, because he's somebody who really is interested in getting those close connections with a faculty member. And I finally told him the other day, I said, you have to look at Muhlenberg. You have to look at Muhlenberg. Like, you just go do the research on it. He came back and was like, yeah, this is really fantastic, because it will get him where he wants to go for med school. But talk to me about liberal arts colleges and preparation for med school. I'll give that one to either of you. Panelist pick.
Well, this has been bouncing around in my brain the last couple of questions, and it's like pulling the curtain back a little bit, right? Matt and I and Meredith have all worked on the other side of this. And so this is me giving you a little bit of insight. Liberal arts colleges, which I have worked at a couple, know that the belief is that their students are not going to be prepared for whatever X, Y, or Z next step. Like, when I was an admission counselor, I was answering that question frequently. And so what they do is allocate resources to prepare students for life after graduation. There are dedicated career counseling centers that are accessible to students from day one. So much so that many liberal arts colleges have extensive orientation and college transition programs that involve learning how to access career advisors. So as your 17-year-old ideas morph and shift because you took that class on Jane Austen and you realize, no, I want to be America's next great author, or because you take the craft brewing class, which there exists, and you decide you want to be a craft brewer, those career advisors are right there. They know you and they are taking you along the way to help explore those career paths. As far as medical school preparation goes, it's the same exact thing. You have professors that know you personally, you have dedicated resources, and thinking about location, that would be one of the conversations that I would have with students that are interested in a liberal arts to medical school pathway. Where is that liberal arts school located? How much access do they have to hospitals and opportunities for internships, and how do faculty and staff connect students to those opportunities? Because I guarantee you they exist. I guarantee you that if you ask at a particular liberal arts college where students have interned, hospitals are going to be on that list and probably top 10. And, you know, it's said in cliche, but a lot of where you go is who you know. And that is true in your college experience, and those professors that will get to know you and write stellar letters of recommendation for your med school applications. And it's also true when you get out into the workforce and you're doing those internships and you're applying to the med school at that hospital. Like, it all just comes full circle.
Yeah, and I would just add that one of the beauties of a liberal arts education is that your major doesn't have to be biology. You can still go and be the English major if you want, and you have room in your curriculum. There's that flexibility to still take those prereq classes. So I think there's a little bit more freedom to say, all right, I know that I want to go on to med school, but I want to take advantage of these 4 years to also study this other interest of mine. If I know that I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to STEM, maybe these 4 years it's the time where I get to explore these other areas that are of interest, but I'm still taking advantage of the prereqs that I need, because you're going to have a designated advisor who's going to help you along the way with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I even wrote a blog post about this for Collegewise last year about it's sort of a common misconception that students need to major in biology in order to go to med school. And it's absolutely true at a liberal arts college that you have tons of flexibility, but at the same time, like that's one of my favorite misconceptions to sort of bust, because you don't actually have to major in biology to go to med school. You have to hit the pre-med requirements, but you don't have to major in biology. And it is easier, I think, to do it at a liberal arts college because of the nature of a liberal arts education, because you are expected to sort of take all of these different courses in these different areas and prep for med school. It's, you've got chemistry, you've got biology, you've got physics, you've got English, you've got psychology, you've got sociology. Like those are required courses, as well as the biology. You have to take those courses in order to apply to med school and be a good candidate for med school, or to be a candidate at all. So that really makes a difference. And the letters of recommendation for med school make a huge difference too. And I think the number of letters of recommendation that are required for med school applications is surprising sometimes. There's some places that require close to 10 letters, which is kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. But at a liberal arts college, you get a chance to get to know enough people that you actually have a decent chance of getting that many letters of recommendation that are good, people who know you. I want to have us tackle another question here. Caitlin, I know we talked about this a little bit before, this group called Colleges That Change Lives. And I'm definitely going to let you share a lot about the group, but I sort of think of Colleges That Change Lives at the same time that I think about, how can families sort of get comfortable with the idea of these little colleges they've never heard of? Like to me, they're very closely connected, because a lot of liberal arts colleges, they're not necessarily the big famous names, even though they have such high impact in the classroom. And I think CTCL, Colleges That Change Lives, is one of those places. So do you want to talk about them a little bit?
I love Colleges That Change Lives. I am just a total fangirl for them. So the origin of the organization actually is a book that was compiled by Lauren Pope, and there are 2 iterations of it out now, but what came from a book of liberal arts and science colleges, lesser known, right, sort of hidden gems ideas. The idea that this collection of 44 colleges and universities across the country are not as well known, but still making significant impact in their students' lives and their communities around them, right, because of the work that they're doing, the education that they're providing. So he wrote this book, sort of show light on the beauty of all of these schools that, unless you are within a 50-mile radius of any of them, and even sometimes closer to that, you probably have never heard of. And now it's turned into this broader organization that does great work, having exactly this conversation, busting all of the myths of college that we just get fed through media and through friends and family, and the idea that higher education in the United States has to look a particular way, when in reality, there are thousands of schools that are offering something just a little bit different that you just have not heard about. So Colleges That Change Lives, it's a specific, at this point, about 40, 45 set number of colleges and universities broken down by region. It's a great place to start if you are just sort of dipping your toe in the liberal arts and sciences world. But don't stop there by any means. CTCL does wonderful virtual and in-person programming, probably close to wherever it is that you are tuning in from. And if not, that virtual offering that we will probably always have, one silver lining to the pandemic, is a great way to connect and hear more, right? We've name dropped a few CTCL colleges in this webinar already, and I would really encourage students to dive in, buy the book, or just go online, Colleges That Change Lives, and do some research there. And it's not a paid sponsorship, by the way.
No.
I just love it as a counseling tool, and I use it all the time with my students.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to make sure we leave time. We've gotten a couple of really good questions here coming up. Before we head into that, I want to, and if you have other questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box. Some families at this point are probably thinking, well, we could really use some help like this. Working with somebody like Caitlin or Matt or Meredith. We'd love to have you consider working possibly with one of us. If some of you may sort of feel like, yeah, we're in good shape, that's totally fine too. Whatever level of interest you have right now, feel free to go ahead and click that in the poll. We'll pass that along to our team, and then somebody will get in touch with you with the proper information volume, depending on what you've clicked. You can tell we all really get a huge kick out of what we do and working with students and trying to get them excited about different areas. So when you get the recording, you'll get the follow-up information you're requesting here. So all right, we've got a good combination of interest here. So well, thank you for sharing, folks. Matt, I'm going to send the first barn burner of a question your way. And this is one on cost. This one's come up in the Q&A already. And it's also one that I know we've all gotten from families we've worked with. The sticker price is shocking. But what's the actual sort of reality in your experience, and how do you talk with families about that, or how would you recommend families try and think about that?
Yeah, shocking is an accurate word for that. It's true. The unfortunate reality of college at this point in time is that it is expensive, whether you're looking at a state flagship institution or a small liberal arts school. Anywhere is going to cost a significant amount of money. Liberal arts colleges will have that larger sticker price, but I would encourage you to dig in and do a little bit more research before automatically crossing a school off the list. And the reason for this is that a lot of small liberal arts colleges will have financial aid packages that actually are very competitive with your local flagship institution. It was very common for me when I was working at the independent school in Colorado for students to have multiple liberal arts colleges on their list that were actually cheaper than CU Boulder. And the reasons for this vary by school. If you work with any college counselor, you will get used to hearing the answer, it depends, because there are very few universals in this process. But one thing that is true is that financial aid offerings are going to vary by school. And in liberal arts areas specifically, there are these two types of financial aid: need-based and merit-based aid. And there are some liberal arts colleges that are strictly need-based when it comes to their financial aid packages. So they are calculating the family's financial need, and if the family is able to pay that sticker price, you might not get any scholarship money from that institution. But there are liberal arts colleges that also have merit-based aid. And that's where they're looking at a student's extracurricular activity list. They're looking at the student's GPA and standardized test scores, and they're able to give some financial aid based off of those achievements that students are able to kind of talk about in their application. And oftentimes those merit-based offerings are a little bit larger than what an in-state institution might be able to provide.
That's great. I think the other piece that I mentioned to families is also the net price calculator thing.
Yep.
Do you want to?
Yeah, so every school in the country that receives federal aid is required to have a net price calculator on their website. And this is a tool where you're able to go in and plug in some information, and it will give you a ballpark of what you can expect to contribute to that institution. Some schools will have better net price calculators that give a little bit more of an accurate ballpark than others. A good rule to kind of go by is the longer it takes you to fill it out, the more accurate it will probably be. But I think that before you cross any school off the list, you need to complete the net price calculator to see what the ballpark might actually be.
Yeah, because sometimes it is that more expensive, and other times it is comparable to a state university in your state, or sometimes less expensive depending on all of the different factors. Absolutely. I think another question that we get sometimes, and that came in the Q&A, is for somebody who isn't working with a college counselor. So somebody who's working with us, like, we can help students find these liberal arts gems. We can help them sort of figure out where the places are that are going to be great fits. What advice do you have for somebody who's sort of trying to dip their toe in, Caitlin? I mean, obviously we talked about CTCL as a great starting place, but beyond that, what advice do you have, and what recommendations would you give for students and families to look for other liberal arts colleges and start to get a sense of them? And I should also say, because of the history of liberal arts colleges and the way higher education grew up in the US, there is an uneven distribution of them across the US. I should also say that they are everywhere, but they're in different proportions in different parts of the country. I should say that too.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I don't know if I have specific advice on, like, beyond CTCL, colleges that change lives, finding good liberal arts gems. But this idea of beyond just Google, which is a very powerful tool, but can be overwhelming. How do you start to build your knowledge base about what your options are? One of my favorite pieces of advice to give students, especially if they're younger in this process, but pretty much across the board, and it is applicable to parents and family and support members too, ask those around you, whether it's friends and family, or your pediatrician, or your optometrist, whether it's, somebody that you are doing an internship for, or the person that you just look up to at school. Ask them where they went to college, if they did, and you will start uncovering schools that you've never heard of. And that can be a really strong sort of enlightening activity, to realize that, the 5 to 10 schools that you know of off the top of your head are not the only ones that the people that are in your life that you deem to be successful attended.
That's a great explanation. What would you say is your favorite sort of search engine that you would direct students toward? Because I figured, like, a side hack sometimes is colleges that are of a certain size and a college search engine. Like, I would usually point students to Big Future as a starting place off the College Board website, although their new search engine isn't quite as good as their old one. Yeah. That would be the other place that I would start for that. We're almost out of time. I'm going to ask one last question here. What is the last piece of advice that you think? Sorry, let me rephrase that question. This sort of came in a different way. I'm trying to figure out how to explain it or phrase it properly. A couple of different pieces together. What do you think is the one biggest takeaway you would want a family to have in terms of what would be a student who would be a fantastic fit and should seriously consider a liberal arts college at this point as you're trying to build your list? And again, just like with any other college, liberal arts colleges are not going to be right for every student. We know that. But what do you think would be sort of that last piece of advice about, like, make sure you really consider this?
I think if you want to have an engaged experience, again, whether that's academically, whether that's with your extracurricular activities, if you want to go and be an active member of a community, I think a liberal arts college could be a great place for you. Obviously, you can do that at a large public institution as well. I'm not saying that this is an exclusive experience to liberal arts colleges, but I think that it's more the norm at a liberal arts college to, again, have multiple things on your resume that don't necessarily relate to each other. And I think the students that thrive and really enjoy their experiences are the ones that take advantage of all of those opportunities that are presented to them.
Great. Caitlin, what would you say?
Yeah, so remember when I answered the question about crunchy granola hippies? I'm going to get a little woo-woo on you all with my psychology degree. I really believe that liberal arts and science colleges provide a transformational experience. And it can be hard, I think, sometimes for a high schooler, it was for me, sitting in that seat, to view college as that, or to be able to articulate that that's what I was looking for from my college experience. But I knew it wasn't just a major. Psychology is one that you're going to find on pretty much any list of majors at any college and university. So it was not a narrowing option for me. But I couldn't articulate it. I couldn't say, Google, find me transformative colleges. Like, I had no idea. But the more I thought about this gut instinct that drew me to the institution that I attended, and the one that I talk about with students all the time, the vibe, the like, oh, I stepped on campus and I just knew, and pushing on why, what is the vibe, what is the gut like saying to you? And students would give me examples of what Matt was talking about, being engaged, seeing people taking advantage of opportunities, being aspirational, being creative, right? Just having some connection to the ethos of the school that they're vibing with. To me, that is a subconscious like indicator of transformation, right? Like, it is speaking to your soul in a way. I told you I was going to get woo-woo, I'm sorry. It is speaking to your soul in a way that means the person that you enter as is not going to be the same person that when you leave, in the best way possible. So if that speaks to you and what you've been hoping to find in your college search, then liberal arts and science college is definitely something that you should consider.
I love that. I love both of those. I think my takeaway would be, if you are somebody who is curious about a lot of different things, but maybe isn't totally decided about what direction you want to go in, a liberal arts college is an ideal place to consider, because you never know where you're going to end up, because you'll take the one random class and it'll catalyze all of these different interests. So that's what I would encourage. So we are officially out of time. Caitlin, Matt, thank you so much for joining me in this discussion, and thanks to everybody for joining us this evening. As I said earlier, this is being recorded. You will get a copy of this recording, or a link to the recording, I should say, in your email in the next couple of days. And you'll also get a little bit more information about Collegewise for those of you who are interested in possibly considering working with one of us. Thank you so much. Good luck on your college journey. Enjoy it. It really is a pretty spectacular time. Thanks so much.